Ecology is the scientific study of living organisms in their environment, taking into account all the living things as well as the physical surroundings. The study of ecology is a subdiscipline of biology that can be narrowed to more specific areas of study like behavior ecology, conservation ecology, and even theoretical ecology. An organism requires a particular habitat in which it plays a role and interacts with other individuals. Everything in the habitat can and almost always does have an impact on everything else in the habitat. All species and the environment are intertwined. These interactions should contribute to the overall fitness of organisms by facilitating survival, reproduction, or both. Ecology is a multidisciplinary field that incorporates zoology, botany, microbiology, and physical sciences like geology and chemistry to study the complex relationships between organisms and the environment. Take a second to look at this picture that is shown on the screen. What are the different factors that you see in this picture? Most of you are first going to see the animals like the reptiles and the birds and the mammals and the bugs, right? Then you're going to move on probably to the various greenery. So you have trees and leaves and grass and some lilies and that sort of thing, right? Other factors that you may not think about are going to be the microbes or the bacteria or any other microorganisms that could potentially be within this environment. They could be on the trees, on the animals, inside the animals, in the water, in the soil, that sort of thing. There are others as well that you're not going to be able to see, right? So you have things like sunlight and temperature and water and the soil. The difference between these two things are going to be biotic and abiotic factors. So an ecosystem consists of living or biotic components. This is going to include plants, animals, and microorganisms. There are also non-living abiotic components to the ecosystem, like sunlight, temperature, and water. Looking in your book, the very first question on page 47 is list as many biotic components of a wetland ecosystem as you can. So looking at this, take a second to write down as many things as you can see. If you need help, go back and listen to what I said before. Number 2, list as many abiotic components of a wetland ecosystem as you can. So earlier I did say temperature, water, and sunlight. There's also going to be the soil, air composition, humidity, and rocks. All of these are going to be abiotic or non-living factors or components within your ecosystem. A population ecologist considers all individuals of one species within a defined environment like the population of wolves in Yellowstone National Park. Community ecology broadens to the summation of all the populations in a defined environment like the community of all plants, animals, and microorganisms in Yellowstone National Park. In an ecosystem, the study is expanded to include abiotic components in the defined environment in addition to the biotic community. A marsh, a mountaintop, and a prairie are all ecosystems. A biome is a major, large-scale ecosystem with distinct plants, animals, climate, and geology. Some biomes include the desert, the rainforest, the savanna, the ocean, the tundra, and many more. Lastly, the biosphere is the total of all ecosystems on the planet. In other words, it is the global ecology. Because there are so many interactions to study, specialists in ecology may focus their research exclusively on one ecosystem or on one level of ecology hierarchy. As an example, an ecologist could do research in something as specific as the Gila monster population of the Moab Desert. Some branches of ecology, like landscape ecology, crop ecology, and urban ecology, take into account artificial ecosystems completely devised by man. Species are able to exist in an ecosystem not only because it fulfills their needs, but also because they provide something of benefit back to the community. A species' role in the ecosystem is called its ecological niche, which can be thought of as its occupation and address. The occupation part is its job in the ecosystem, like decomposer, pollinator, or producer. The address part is the habitat where it lives in the ecosystem. A species niche is very specific, and the ecosystem depends on it just as much as the species does. The niche is partly tied to how the species obtain energy from the ecosystem and how it returns energy back to the ecosystem. Frequently, this is by eating and getting eaten, but not always. This is called the trophic level. Every living organism both obtains and provides energy for other trophic levels. Energy flow in an ecosystem is a cycle, so there is no end or beginning, but let us start with producers for this discussion. Producers typically obtain energy by converting sunlight to sugar for energy in a process called photosynthesis. You may have thought of plants immediately. However, algae, some bacteria, and some protozoans also photosynthesize. Animals that eat producers are called primary consumers. They obtain all energy from eating plants or other producers, so they are also called herbivores. Primary consumers are then eaten by secondary consumers. Quite often, secondary consumers are omnivores, meaning they obtain energy from eating animals and plants. Tertiary consumers eat secondary consumers, and they can be omnivores or carnivores, which obtain all of their energy from eating animals. Decomposers are organisms that get their energy by decomposing dead plants and animals. It is the manifestation of the particular genes involved rather than the quantity of genes that causes the vastly different appearances. Decomposition releases energy and other nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus back to the ecosystem. These nutrients are required by plants and animals and cannot be obtained from the dead organisms without the assistance of the decomposers. Thus, the cycle continues. It is interesting to note Madagascar hissing cockroaches have a very high protein content, several times higher than chicken or beef. This fact makes them a very desirable food source for many omnivores and carnivores in their natural ecosystem. They have even been seriously considered as a nutrient-rich food source for humans. If you all remember the video from Lab 4, the man talked about putting spaghetti sauce on them. We all thought it was a joke. However, many people do actually eat the Madagascar hissing cockroach. The niche is also determined by special roles a species performs in the ecosystem. The niche is also determined by special roles a species performs in the ecosystem. A bee obtains energy from plant nectar, so it is an herbivore. In doing so, pollen is collected on its body and spread from flower to flower. This helps the plants because it allows them to cross-fertilize and produce seed-bearing fruit from which new plants will grow. Bees are pollinators, which is a special ecological niche. Some animals have the role of recyclers or scavengers. They eat food which is starting to decay or rot. They make use of a food source other animals will no longer eat. Like the decomposers, they release nutrients locked up in otherwise unsuitable food sources. An ecosystem is shaped by the niches accompanied, the abundance in populations, and the diversity of populations. Diversity is the variety of occupied niches, while abundance is the number of individuals filling any given niche. A successful community must have the species diversity to cover the niches for all trophic levels and special roles, as well as enough individuals at each trophic level to support the energy requirements of the next higher level. However, there is also a limit to how many individuals and species the ecosystem can support. Populations, communities, and ecosystems are shaped by interactions. An individual continually interacts with members of its own species, members of other species, and the abiotic parts of its environment. These interactions are so critical, the entire balance of the ecosystem depends on them. Take the introduction of a non-native species to an ecosystem as an example. The new interactions between the native and non-native species can have second and third order effects throughout the ecosystem. Zebra mussels are native to the Black Sea and Caspian Sea, but were introduced to the Great Lakes and Hudson River by attaching to the sides of ships traveling between the two regions. The zebra mussels have been highly successful in the new habitats, but they are outcompeting the native mussels to the point the native species existence is now threatened. Intraspecific interactions are ones occurring between members of the same species. These can be competitive or cooperative. Intraspecific competition may be for resources like food when it is scarce, but competition for a mate or for dominance are also extremely common. Cooperative interactions include social behaviors, parental care, signaling, and mating. Looking in your book on page 49, number 3, what intraspecific interactions have you noticed in the laboratory Madagascar hissing cockroach colony? Note whether each interaction was cooperative or competitive. 2 examples of this would be fighting and mating. So, fighting would be a competitive interaction, right? So you have 2 males that are fighting, or there is also mating. Mating would be a cooperative interaction, right? So, looking at these 3 pictures that I have above, there are, all of these are of your Madagascar hissing cockroaches. So, the first one is a whole bunch of cockroaches on a cave wall. This interaction is called aggregation. So, all of these cockroaches will naturally aggregate into a colony on the cave walls. The next that you see is going to be aggression. So, you see 2 males that are going head to head using their horns to fight. The final one is going to be mating. As you can see, you have a female and a male, and the 2 of them are mating. These are going to be intraspecific interactions. Remember, intraspecific are going to be between the same species. Interspecific interactions occur between members of different species. Aside from humans, your cockroach is currently involved in one observable interspecific interaction. Looking at number 4, what interspecific interaction can you directly observe from your cockroaches? So, we talked about this at the very beginning of class when you guys first arrived on campus. Your interspecific interaction for these is going to be the mites. So many of you have been able to see the mites on your cockroaches, and this is going to be typically a commensal relationship. So we're now going to talk about the 5 categories of interspecific interactions based on the benefit or detriment to the 2 species. Always at least one species must benefit for the interaction to continue. If neither species benefited, then there would be no reason for the interaction to persist. So the first interaction that we're going to look at is going to be predation. So looking at the praying mantis, this praying mantis is eating what looks like maybe a grasshopper or something. And this is going to be predation, right? So the praying mantis sought after and found this grasshopper to eat. The praying mantis benefits, and the grasshopper does not make it through this interaction. The next interaction we're going to look at is going to be competition. So in this case, you see elephants, looks like a rhinoceros, and maybe some gazelle or some other type of deer-like creature. All of these are going to be in competition for the grass that you see, right? All of them are herbivores, and so they're going to compete with each other for this food. The next is going to be parasitism. So parasitism is beneficial to one species and detrimental to the other, but the mechanism is typically different. So in predation, the interaction is quick and lasts just long enough for the predator to obtain and consume the prey. However, in parasitism, the parasite benefits from long-term interaction with the host by depleting just enough resources to meet its needs without causing death to the host. It is uncomfortable for the parasite if its host dies because the parasite has to expend energy to find a replacement. Sick or weak is acceptable, but dead is never the intention. Intestinal worms in mammals and ticks on dogs are great examples of parasitism. Other examples include the one here, which is leeches, which look like they're on an ankle or foot of some sort. Our next interaction that we're going to look at is going to be mutualism. So mutualism is an interaction benefiting both species directly. So if you look at this, you see an eel and what looks like a shrimp, right? So this eel is benefiting from the shrimp cleaning its teeth because the eel, it no longer has any type of bacteria or algae or any other sources in its mouth that could potentially be detrimental. The shrimp then benefits because it is getting a food source from this eel. So this is going to be mutualism. The final type of interaction we're going to look at is called commensalism. So commensalism is an interaction considered to be beneficial for one species, but is neither beneficial or detrimental to the other. So commensalism, in this case, if you're looking at the picture, you see a shark and what looks like some type of fish that is probably cleaning the shark. So the shark doesn't really benefit much from this. The shark just kind of continues on and does its thing, but the fish is actually gaining a food source from this, right? So this is going to be a commensal relationship. Many scientists believe that there are not any true commensal relationships, that no matter what, they both must benefit in some way or another. However, for this case, we are going to stick with commensalism as our fifth interaction for interspecific interactions. So, like we talked about a little bit earlier, mites are a great example of commensalism. So your mites are going to benefit from the cockroaches by getting food and such resources. However, they do not affect your cockroaches at all. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen the mites on the cockroaches. I have even gotten mites on my hands and stuff because sometimes they just come off. So this does happen often, and it is a commensal relationship. Your cockroach and all other cockroaches have another interspecific interaction that you are not able to observe directly. That is the microorganisms like bacteria and protists that live in their digestive system. So you can see on here, this is actually a termite. However, termites and Madagascar hissing cockroaches have very similar gut microbes. And so the purpose of this interaction is to keep the MHC healthy, and it regulates their gut health as well. Humans also have various gut microbes. All animals do. These microbes are used in the same way to regulate your health and to continue your gut health. So in many cases, people that take antibiotics, if you do not take the full set of antibiotics, sometimes the bad microorganisms are going to be wiped out, but so are some of the good ones. And so sometimes people are able to colonize some of the bad microorganisms again. And so this can be an issue. This is why when you take antibiotics, you should also take probiotics to sort of balance out and make sure that the good microbes stay in your guts. So this type of interaction would be considered a mutualism interaction because both are benefiting from this. The Madagascar hissing cockroach gets its name from its native habitat, the island of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean off the southeast coast of Africa. This island is quite large, the fourth largest in the world, so it has a variety of ecosystems from desert to tropical rainforests. The Madagascar hissing cockroach lives on the rainforest floor. For your homework, for Lab 6, you're going to watch a video about Madagascar from the BBC Earth series. While watching this, keep these questions in mind while you watch the video. None of these questions are answered directly. You must observe and infer information about the Madagascar hissing cockroach's ecology from the video. When looking at the biotic factors especially, look at, does it eat the MHC? Does the MHC eat it? And does it eat the same thing as the MHC? Other questions you may need to think of are, what are the biotic components of the Madagascar hissing cockroach environment? What are the abiotic components of the Madagascar hissing cockroach environment? What is the trophic level of the Madagascar hissing cockroach? What is the ecological niche of the Madagascar hissing cockroach, including its trophic level and any special roles? What are food sources of the MHCs in its natural environment, and from what trophic level are they? What are potential predators of the Madagascar hissing cockroach in its natural environment, and from what trophic level are they? What are potential competitors in the natural ecosystem of MHCs? For which species is the MHC a predator? You will find these questions on Blackboard. You will also find the video on Blackboard for you all to watch. When going through these questions, be specific. For biotic factors, I should not see anything that says animals or plants. You need to be specific with what animals or plants you see in the video. This is for me to make sure that you do indeed actually watch the video. Try and be as specific as possible. You can watch the video as many times as you need, and you can also use your book for this. If you have questions throughout, please let me know. I'm happy to help, and I'm happy to answer any questions. This assignment is due on Sunday, October 18th by 11 p.m. So this video is about an hour long, so you should not start it at about 10 o'clock, right? Make sure you do this in plenty of time so that you can get as much done as possible. And if you have questions, you are able to actually ask me them.